I've often compared perimeter defense in the NBA to a high-wire act. Guards and wings are desperately trying to stay in front of the offensive players, even though the rules dramatically favor them. Balancing on a high wire is only safe with a safety net, and that's the role of a big man. Yes, they will fall, but will the big man be there to save them? My name is Mike, and I'm here with Sam, and on today's big question, we're talking about why the Suns' safety net, Deandre Ayton, will be an X factor in the playoffs. Let's go. All right, Sam, earlier this year, actually at the beginning of the season, we did a video on Deandre Ayton, and we talked extensively about how the numbers were not everything and how the importance of him understanding his role was vital for him to be successful this season. That included, and most importantly, defense, and that's something we talked about extensively. So I think when you look at Deandre Ayton's season this season, you might just look at the numbers and think that he got worse this year than last year. And even though I think he struggled a little bit throughout the year, when he was good, he was better than he was last year. So maybe some inconsistency, but I think he was better this year than even last year. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And if we're talking specifically about defense here, in hindsight, it was important that Dario Saric came out of the gate so hot. Remember what he was doing at the beginning of the season. He was having a great stretch and kind of carrying the Suns a little bit at the beginning, even on defense, but Ayton's figured it out. And especially, we talk about some of the more traditional methods of guarding the pick and roll, things like drop coverage, things like defending the rim. Ayton has gotten to the point now as we enter the playoffs for the first time in his career, you're very comfortable about him doing those things. He's not the best in the league. He's not in the top tier. He's not, Rudy Gobert.
Yeah.
He's at the point, though, where he's clearly a very above average center at doing those types of things. Where it starts to get a little bit difficult for him, and we've talked about this plenty before, is some of the advanced decision making, and that's where it's going to be so fascinating to see him in the playoffs because teams are going to try specifically to target his weaknesses, and we have to see if he can hold up.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the difference between offense and defense in this specific year, I think you have to acknowledge the importance of him accepting the role that was needed in order for this team to be good this year. Because I think normally you have a number one pick, right? Number one overall. You're going to spend significant years investing in that player's growth where maybe they get the ball more than they should. Like, for example, this year, Anthony Edwards, he could shoot any shot that he possibly wanted to shoot. And that just was not the case for Deandre in his third year in the NBA. Really, we just needed him to be a pick-and-roll guy who scored in pick-and-rolls every once in a while, got a post-up specifically on the baseline, and then scored maybe on offensive rebounds. Found ways to get his offense outside of the normal offensive flow. Now, I do want to point out that's partially because he has not yet developed like significant offensive skills in the NBA. So far, like there isn't a ton of dribbling. There's not a ton of fakes or post moves outside of what he's been doing since he was a rookie. So part of that is on him. But I also think it was important for him to understand that he needed to be a defensive anchor on this team in order for them to be successful. I know that Monty Williams was telling him that. I know that Chris Paul was telling him that because Chris Paul has mentioned it in interview after interview. So I think it was nice to see that in the games he was good. Like, I want to preface this. There were times where he struggled throughout the season. About halfway through the year when the Suns really picked up, I think he got a lot better and a lot more consistent. And in those games, he really embraced that role, I would say.
It's really just become a situation where you always need a big who can be a rim runner. You always need a big who can set strong screens. You always need a big who can protect the rim. In the case of the Suns, this roster is set up so that Deandre Ayton's the only guy who can do that. He's the only guy on this team who can bring that physical edge. So as we go towards the playoffs now, he has to bring it every night. Dario Saric, Frank Kaminsky, they've done a commendable job in their own roles. They're interesting in the sense that they have unique skill sets. They bring other things to the table. Those sorts of things, though, the physical aspects of everything having to do with being a center, they can't do that. And so it's really all on Deandre Ayton, and you're right. He didn't necessarily build out his offensive game a ton this year, but just playing the role that he had to play for the team to be the best, I think he did a great job in that role.
Yeah, and I think you saw the minutes towards the end of the season when Saric fell off a cliff a little bit, how important he was to the team. The team was at its best when he was on the floor, and I think that's going to hopefully carry through to the playoffs. With Deandre, and a lot of the inconsistency is just about his effort, how much he's bringing it on a night-to-night basis. I'm of the belief that once the playoff starts, we can expect a more consistent effort from him because everyone sort of understands the moment and exactly what's needed. In the playoffs, it's not just some random Tuesday night in the regular season where the Suns don't necessarily need a win, right? It's going to be win every night. It's vital. So assuming he brings it every night, that defense could be really good, and it was vital. I mean, defense in the playoffs is even more important than the regular season. Things slow down a bit. You're playing better players. And I think when he was drafted, the idea was that he was going to be this versatile center that can do different things on defense, whether it be switching, which we expect him to do a lot versus the Lakers in this upcoming matchup, or just being a traditional drop center who can play that rim protecting role. But no matter whatever the Suns end up doing, that's going to be even more important, and what he does is going to be even more important in the playoffs.
The bottom line is he's going to have to make more decisions. He's going to be at the center of every play for the Suns on defense. We're not sure exactly how the Suns are going to guard the pick and roll against the Lakers yet, but regardless of what they do, they're up against LeBron James, who is one of the smartest basketball players ever, one of the best basketball players ever at deconstructing a defense and just understanding the full potential of what's available to him in every play, finding counters to break apart a defense. And so if Deandre Ayton has those weaknesses, LeBron is going to try to find, and Anthony Davis too, by the way, are going to try and find ways to exploit it. That's the biggest challenge for DA. It's not that he's not capable, but his inexperience, there is great potential there that shines through in a playoff setting.
Yeah, it's going to be really important for him to sort of, I call it stacking decision-making, make decision after decision after decision, because with the Lakers, as you said, they're going to play until the end of that shot clock, right? And you're not necessarily going to turn it over from them a lot, so you're going to have to defend until that last shot goes up, and then fight for the rebound. I think that's the end of the defensive possession, right? Deandre Ayton is now going against one of the best rebounders, probably the best rebounder in the NBA, in Andre Drummond, and if Drummond's out, Anthony Davis isn't a slouch there either. His focus on the boards is going to be incredibly important in this game as well. Mm-hmm. I think, like, for him, like this specific series, he's probably going to be guarding LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Andre Drummond. Like, that's just going to, and there are going to be possessions where he gets switched out onto Schroeder or onto Caruso, onto the guards as well. Like, there is no scenario where he's just going to be that big man in the paint. What he does is going to be across the board guarding every single guy, specifically that 3, 4, and 5 that they're going to play.
And not only is it difficult to do all of that and to play that physical role and to also grab all the rebounds and contest the shots, but he has to find a way to navigate this situation his first time in the playoffs and also not get into foul trouble against a couple of superstars who are likely to get calls from the refs, if we're being honest. Deandre Ayton, he averaged 31 minutes per game in the regular season this year. The best situation for the Suns is if he shows the conditioning and avoids foul trouble enough to get up into around the 34-36 range in the playoffs. That's what you're hoping to see. You're hoping, honestly, with the way that some of the other bigs on this team have played, to minimize the Kaminsky and Saric minutes if you can. And Ayton, I mean, it's so tough. It's going to be really hard, but this is why we say he's the X factor, Mike. I don't think you can win this series unless Deandre Ayton shows out.
Yeah, he has to control the paint. There's a scenario where you don't really want Saric on the floor at center with LeBron James on the floor on the other team. Like, that's just not, that's food for LeBron James, the way that Saric has been playing towards the end of the season. In many ways, Monty Williams should try to match LeBron James's minutes with DeAndre Ayton. That does not necessarily mean that DeAndre Ayton is guarding LeBron in all of those minutes, but he is guarding the rim, and that's where LeBron is the most dangerous. So that is why what he does in this specific series is the most important, because there's nobody else that can do it on this team, and that brings the pressure in him specifically.
It is sink or swim time. That's a little bit dramatic to hear me say that, but hey, this guy wants a lot of money on a second contract.
Yeah.
Here's his chance to earn it.
Yeah, that's right. That's the other thing. He can get an extension as soon as this summer, and players make money in the playoffs, as we've seen time and time again, specifically centers. Obviously, we will keep track of this as the playoffs roll. Check out our podcast, the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. We're going to record after every single playoff game that the Suns play in and give you a recap of that game and what we expect the adjustments to be as the playoffs roll. DeAndre Ayton is going to be very, very important. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any comments for us, leave them in the comments.